A lot of people struggle to make good financial decisions, and I don't really know why. So today, I wanted to give you a look into something that I think I know a lot about, but I'm not really qualified to talk about it. I don't have the degree. I don't have the provenance. However, I'm very, very opinionated about finance, taxes, business. I hope and I pray that one day I will have the proof that I know what I'm talking about. A lot of the times that will come in, a successful business or a presence that extends beyond, the internet, social media. I hope to have that one day. So then maybe I can find out if what I'm about to tell you here today is legitimate or not. Regardless, economists, people who are, who study business and finance, they may disagree with what I'm going to say here today. But one thing is undeniable. This will put you to sleep. In fact, most of you are probably asleep already. That's how boring this is. In fact, I may go back to what I talked about in the very beginning of this video. Most people struggle to make good financial decisions. I think this is why. It's incredibly boring. At least to most people. To me, I don't know, I really like it. So I really want to start another YouTube channel about business, finances, taxes, stuff along those lines. But again, I don't think I have the qualifications to talk about it yet. If I were to do that now, people would say like, well, who's this clown? What do they think they're doing? It just wouldn't make sense. So then, without further ado, the first thing I wanted to talk about is the philosophy on debt. Now, I have a very reasonable philosophy on debt, I think. But in order to understand my philosophy, we have to look at some of the other leading philosophies. So, on this side of the spectrum, we'll put on Dave Ramsey. And what Dave Ramsey says is you should work really, really hard, very, very quickly, and pay off all your debt, and you should pause everything else. And that includes retirement investing. He will say, stop retirement investing. You don't get to have fun. You don't get to enjoy anything really until this debt is cleared up. So he uses a phrase called gazelle intense. I don't know how to spell the word gazelle. I just found out. And you know what? That's okay. You don't have to know everything all the time. You don't have to spell everything all the time. And you know what? Maybe I think it's fun to just hang out with my ASMR buddies and not know how to spell Africa's most loved deer. Gazelle's probably not even a deer, so I'm 0 for 2 so far. But let's get back on track. Folks, quit getting me off track. So he uses the term gazelle intense. So no fun. But here's the big one, and this is where people get all up in arms. He says no 401k. A 401k we'll talk about here in a bit, but a 401k is a tax-advantaged retirement savings plan. So what that means basically is you put non-taxable income, or non-taxed income, I guess rather, into a 401k. And then another company manages the investments and disperses it in different stocks. And there are rules for how often you can take money out of the 401k. Well, I guess it's not really often. It's whenever you turn 59 and a half. So you cannot take money out of a 401k until you turn 59 and a half. Well, I guess you can, but then you have a penalty. It's a huge penalty. I don't know what it is, like 50 or 10% or something like that. And, but once you take it out at age 59 and a half, you have to pay taxes on it. But the theory here, well, I guess it's not a theory. The way that is a benefit for a lot of people is whenever you're like 20, let's say your late 20s, early 30s, you're making a lot of money. You're in a very high tax bracket when you put it in here. That's saving you a lot of money now. Later, when you pull it out and you're taxed, well, you're going to be in a much lower tax bracket because you're going to be retired. And let's see, what else does Dave Ramsey say? That's the most important part for what we're talking about here. Delaying the investment. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, you have a fella called Robert Kiyosaki. I can spell Kiyosaki, but I cannot spell gazelle. And what he will say is debt, when used properly, because I don't want to misinterpret, or I don't want to misrepresent him. He would say credit card debt is bad. He doesn't think all debt is good. So consumer debt is bad. Everybody agrees consumer debt is bad. You are stupid if you have consumer debt. You are stupid, or you are in a very, very bad situation. But having a credit card balance is dumb. Klarna, if that's what it's even called, I don't even know anymore. I don't do that stuff. Is like incredibly stupid, okay? By the way, just short, quick little spiel about the credit cards. If you have a credit card and you don't pay off your balance, you are literally a pawn in their game. I'm not even kidding. We are living through an actual experiment right now in the United States where these credit card lenders are trying to see what they can get away with. And I'm not even kidding. It's very obvious. There's like rates of like 20+% or something like that. And it's just going to keep going up and up and up until people stop getting these credit cards and paying these interest rates. I'm not kidding. You can look that up. That is factual. You are just a pawn in their game. But anyway, he would say debt is a tool. Get good debt. There's good debt and bad debt. You want to get good debt. Good debt would be like a rental property. Something that it's an asset. Leverage your debt to get an asset, something that makes you money in your sleep. He will say, everybody likes that idea, right? How many TikTok gurus and YouTube gurus are like, yeah, just use your debt, just get like 1 million. I see this one guy on TikTok. He makes fun of these fake financial influencers like Grant Cardone, I think is one of these scam artists' names. And he'll see clips of them. They're like, here's what I would do, get 20 rental properties. And this guy on TikTok, he'll take that clip and make a new clip and say like, why not 30? Why not 40? Why are you only getting 20 rental properties? You should get 30 or 40, because they make it sound so easy. It's not. Okay. But yeah, he will say, leverage your debt to get assets. And yeah. Now, these are kind of like the two opposite schools of thought. Okay, Dave is boring. Boring. This is exciting. This is easy too. Leveraging your debt, that's easy. Everybody can leverage their earning potential, get a loan from the bank or whatever. That's easy. Sacrifice, that's hard. So a lot of people think because there's sacrifice involved here, this is the best. And then other puerile people will think, well, this looks fun, so this is the best. You're only young once. You can't take it with you. Have fun while you're here, But there's more to the story here. Dave Ramsey preaches, or teaches rather, what he calls the debt snowball. And what this says is you list out your debts, smallest to largest, monthly payment. And you pay off the smallest one first. All of your income. All of your income from your paycheck, your little slave wage W-2 gig, goes to that smallest payment. Once that's gone, you apply that money that would have been eaten up by that payment to the next one. Once that's gone, you do the next one. Notice here it's the amount you're paying per month and not the interest rate. He doesn't look at the interest rate. A lot of people take fault with this because they will say you should pay your loan with the highest interest rate first. Because the highest interest rate loan is the one that's accumulating the most interest and therefore is the most expensive. You want that one out of your life first. Okay, that's something called a debt avalanche, I believe. It's just semantics. Debt avalanche, or whatever you want to call it, would be pay off the interest or the loan with the highest interest rate. Like at 9% interest or whatever. But there's a third one, and this is the one I did. Okay, and it's called the debt tidal wave, I think, or something like that. Debt tsunami or debt typhoon, I don't know. And it says you want to pay off your most emotional debt first. And that's what I did. I owed my parents money, and I did not like that. It was my lowest interest loan, and it was my highest monthly payment because it was such a huge, principal. So in both of these scenarios, it would not be the first one to attack, but for me it was. Because I could breathe after I got that done with. I finally paid back my parents. Finally, they don't own me anymore. Okay, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but you get it. There could be other reasons why you may have an emotional attachment to a loan. I don't know. Maybe you had some property that was very important to you, and you needed to have that paid off. I don't know. I'm just making up a scenario. Okay. A very common criticism of this, especially when we talk about the debt snowball, is that it is not optimized. And here's what's important, folks. I am pretty sure, based on some of the things Dave Ramsey has said, in his heart, he also knows that this is not optimized. At the end of his teachings, you will end up with not the absolute most amount of money that you possibly could have in the process of paying off your debt as quickly as possible. Okay. And I am pretty sure he knows that. I think he will continue to say, debt snowball, gazelle intense, because this works 100% of the time, regardless of your background, regardless of what your profession is, regardless of how much debt you have. this will work. Guarantee it. Is it the best? Is it the most optimized? No. When people start trying to be tricksters and they start to, oh, I could take my credit card debt and do a loan transfer to another credit card and I get 0% for 6 months or whatever. When you start trying to churn credit card rewards, whenever you try to turn this into a math problem, he uses that term. It's not a math problem. It's a spending, or no, he would say it's not a math problem. It's a human problem or something like that. I forget what he says exactly. Then you start to lose sight of the goal. Your goal is to do things so geared, so perfectly finely tuned, and not to actually pay off the debt. Then is kind of what it ends up being. Now, most people who have, I will say, like a good career, and for those of you who don't know, I'm a licensed pharmacist in 3 states. I would consider that a pretty good career. You're smart enough to know this. And I think people they fight with Ramsey about this. You don't need to fight with him, okay? You can do your own debt payoff thing. You don't have to do exactly what he says. And I didn't. I paid off my debt in a much different way. By the way, just so we're all aware here, I had $290,000 in debt whenever I came out of pharmacy school in 2017. And I think I was making about 120 or so thousand at the time. That's good money. I was 23, 24, something like that. I think I was 24. That's really good money. But I could never enjoy it knowing that I had 290,000 of debt on my shoulders. And here's another thing. Pharmacists are bad with money. They are so dumb, I think. I've heard people think maxing out their 401k means contributing 5% of their salary so that they get their employee match. They think that's what maxing out a 401k means. Virtually everyone in my class had a new BMW right away. I didn't. No siree, I eat McDoubles. I was a McDouble boy when I was paying off my debt. McDoubles and water for 4.5 years, baby. And I paid it all back, and it was horrible. It was the worst experience of my life. But I got it done. People talk about the public student loan forgiveness scam. I call it a scam, but it's not really. So what you're supposed to do there is you're supposed to work for a nonprofit for 10 years and then your debt gets forgiven. Problem with that is only about 4% of people have ever gotten their debt forgiven who apply. That means you have a 96% chance of not getting that forgiveness. I was not okay with those odds. That's why I just paid mine back. Sheer brute force and determination. There's also something called, there's some IBRs, income-based repayments. These are even worse of a scam. When you're on this program, your interest amortizes on the principal. Yeah, you only have to pay a percentage of your income, which is great. But I think it's like 15 or 20. I don't think it's 20 years. I forget how long the IBRs are, but whenever you do this one, your loan, whatever you're not paying, it goes to the principal. If I would have done an income-based repayment plan, I would have had like $700,000 in loans or something like that. And then it would have theoretically been wiped out. But if it didn't, oh my gosh, that would have been horrible. I wasn't willing to take that risk, so I just paid it back. Now down here for Robert, I'm way less familiar with his. Okay, but let's get in the middle here. There's another guy. I don't know his name, but he has a YouTube channel here called Clear Value Tax. And he has a really great philosophy. He says all debt is bad, but sometimes the benefits outweigh the risks. This is much more logical. This is much, much better in my opinion. He gives an example. If I get $3,000 bonus at work, okay, and my mortgage is, let's say, 5%, he will say, I will rather take that $3,000 and put it in the stock market, 401k. You know, you assume a 7% return on investment there. Could be more, it could be 8, 9, or 10%, right? He would say that's what he would rather do. Because the mortgage rate is 5%. And the rate on the ROI, return on investment, for a 401k or whatever, is a higher percentage. But don't think that that means that you just go with whatever is the more beneficial percentage. Because he gives another example. What if I get a $3,000 bonus at work and I owe my brother a loan at 6%? Okay? And my mortgage is 5%. Wait, let's reverse those numbers. I own my brother a loan. Let's say I owe my brother a loan at 4%, let's say. But my mortgage is 6%. He would say, I'd rather pay off my brother. It's a lower interest rate, and it's not the smart mathematical thing to do, mathematically speaking. But there's that emotional tie to the loan to the brother. You want to get rid of it. This is what I say. I don't care what you do. I don't care if you want to pay off your debt quickly like I did. And I don't care if you want to make really good investments in the stock market. Perhaps even leverage some of your credit to buy assets or whatever. I don't care which one you do. But do it. Don't flip back and forth. Don't pick a middle ground. Whatever your decision is, go for it and don't look back. Wow, if that wasn't boring enough, this will really excite you. And by excite you, I mean put you to sleep. Now we are going to talk about the American tax system. Who else is really excited? I am. For all of my European and Canadian viewers, of which there are quite a few actually, for some reason, I never thought that I would have an audience that would be this large. I'm so happy and I'm so grateful for it though. In fact, you're all very welcome, by the way. I love, especially whenever folks from other countries talk to me in the comments about things that may be different in their country. I love that. Continue to do that. We love it. You may be very jealous of this part, though. The American tax system. I know this is a weird thing to say, but bear with me. I'm a fan of our tax system. I'm not a fan of our tax rates. I don't think anybody is. You could never make anybody happy with a tax rate, I don't think. But ours is, it's a pretty good system. So let me explain how this works. In the United States, you are taxed on, let's say, a logarithmic scale. It's not really, but your rate of taxation, okay, increases as your income increases. Okay, so it would look something like this. Actually, it would look more like this. It gets really steep there at the end. Okay. So how is your tax rate calculated? Well, it's not really a calculation per se. It's actually a table. You can Google. IRS.gov, I'm sure, has the tax rates for 2024, 2025, or whatever year you want to look at. But before I go any further, that actually brings up a good point. When people say taxes, they almost exclusively mean federal taxes, okay, at the national level, the United States taxing you. There's also state and local tax, but for the most part, those aren't really that much, for the most part. I don't know what they are in places like New York City or something like that. And there's also sales tax too, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about income tax at the federal level, which is the most important tax. This is the one most people care most about. So in the United States, the first, I believe, $12,500. You can double check that number. It's not that important. It's somewhere around there. The first $12,500 you make in the year is not taxed. You get that for free. If you're single, by the way. If you're married and you have children, things change, But it changes in your favor. The more married you are, the more kids you have, the less taxes you pay. But the first $12,500, I believe, somewhere around there, you get to keep that. You're so lucky. You get to keep your money, okay? Now, after that, then the tax rates start to kick in. I don't remember what they are off the top of my head. It really doesn't matter. But let's say the next, it would be the next 17,000 you make, okay, it's taxed at, 3% or something like that. Meaning you would owe 3% of $17,000, which I'm not going to pretend like I can figure that out in my head. Okay, I will pretend I can figure it out in my head. So that would be 3. Let's see, carry the 1. I'm such a little goofster. 300. I'm going to say it's $780. Alright, you will owe $780 then. If you make, what's 12,500 plus 17,000? 29,500. Let's say you make $29,500 in 1 year. Then you will owe $780 in taxes. Okay? Now, let's say the next, 20,000, okay? Then it's taxed at 7%. Okay, so then for this, these are called brackets, by the way. First bracket, this is called the standard deduction. Okay. Then the next bracket, I don't know if these brackets have name or not. It's probably the name is probably the 3% bracket or whatever percentage that is. I don't know. So the next bracket, the next 20,000 you make will be taxed at 7%. So for this bracket, you will owe I don't know, 1,300. Okay, so if you make 20,000 plus 17,000 plus 12,500 in 1 year, that'd be 49,500, I think. Okay, you will owe. What's this number supposed to be? 1,300 plus 780. You will owe, $2,000 in taxes. Okay, these numbers do not sound correct to me. I don't know. And then the next bracket, it may be 12%, and then 25%, and then 30%. It gets pretty steep, okay? What this is trying to do, and this is why I actually do like our tax system. People talk about a flat tax, okay? Why don't we just tax, everybody pays 10%, like a tithe. If any of you are Seventh-day Adventist or Christian that believe in tithe, we pay 10% to the church every month. It's a flat tax, 10%. Why don't we do that for taxes? Okay? Here's why. A 10% tax on somebody in this first bracket is devastating. You're only making, what is that, 29,500 per year? 10% of that is devastating. That is a huge change in your life. 10% for somebody who's making 500 thou, they don't care. That they still got the Porsche, baby. They don't care. So what this tries to do is a flat tax, not on your income, but on your quality of life. You're supposed to pay, I'm just making up this number, you're supposed to theoretically pay 10% of your quality of life. Now, of course, there's no actual way to quantify that, but this is our best guess. Does it make sense? There's some people who think once I go into this bracket here where it's taxed at 12%, then all of my money, my entire income for the year is taxed at 12%. All 78,000, I pay 12% on all 78,000. Okay, there's actually not that many people who think that, really, but that's not what's happening. If you were to weigh these averages, I don't know what it would be. Let's say it would be like 6, probably not, I don't know, probably like 7.5% or something like that. You could think, okay, all of my money in the year is taxed at 7.5%. Is a different way of thinking of it. Now, here's another thing. If this wasn't obvious, if you don't make it out of a bracket, which is a term that I've never heard anybody say before, like you're, like it's like a place you don't want to be. It's prorated. Okay, so if this bracket is, I don't know, let's say it's 79,000 total income to 94,000. I don't know. And let's say this bracket is taxed at 15%. Okay, if you make $84,000, then that 5,000 is taxed at 15%. Okay, I don't know if that was obvious or not. So that's how our system works. A lot of people I keep seeing this concept float around the internet. People are like, the government knows how much I owe in taxes. Why don't they just tell me how much I owe? The joke they make is like, there's this really long, complicated math problem that you have to do at the end of the year. And if you're wrong, you go to jail. And it's like, well, how are you going to know I'm wrong? We're like, we already know the answer. Then why don't you just tell me the answer? Nope, you got to figure it out. Okay, as funny as that is, that's only applicable to people who work a W-2 job and don't care if they get taxed to death, which is most people. If you have one source of income, which is your job, then yeah, they know how much they know. If you have multiple sources of income, then they don't know. But they can find out, okay? Now this is where the best advice you will ever get from a licensed pharmacist in 3 states. There are things you can do to avoid paying taxes. Let's say you make $100,000 a year. Okay? That $100,000 is then dispersed amongst the brackets, and the first part's taxed at this rate, the middle part that rate, blah blah blah. But your health care is what's known as an above-the-line deduction. Actually, no, I shouldn't talk about healthcare. That's kind of a different situation. There's things called above-the-line deductions, okay? The most important one is the 401k. We mentioned that earlier, right? So this is a tax-deferred, tax-delayed investment account, meaning there's a federal maximum, I think it's $23,500 for this year, okay? I can contribute $23,500 to my 401k, and that brings my taxable income down to, what is that, 73? Yeah, 72,500. That means I'm only paying taxes on $70,000 or $72,500 instead of $100,000. That difference is now in a 401k and it's earning 7% interest. And that's just being conservative. Now that means that I have less money to play with. Okay, but the proportion is favored into the 401k. Meaning I have, let's say here, if I don't contribute anything to my 401k and I have $100,000 a year, I may get, let's say, $5,000 a month from my job, and this is after taxes, and I get to play with it. Okay. This is what I use to buy medication, because medications are my favorite hobby. I buy lots of medications. I take medications all the time for fun. Normal people will buy things like vacations. I buy medications. I've got a dedication to my medication. If instead we contribute, the federal maximum was at $23,500, okay, then I'm only paying taxes on $77,250. Okay, then my paycheck may go down to, I don't know, $4,600 a month. It's probably gonna be more than that. Yeah, that's about right. Let's say $4,500. Okay, so I get less money out of the year to play with. But the trade-off, when you tally up this difference, $500 times 12, okay, that's fine. Was that $6,000? Okay, there's a $6,000 difference between these two scenarios throughout the year. This is my spending money. In scenario B, where I'm contributing to the 401k, there's a $6,000 difference. So I have $6,000 less play money in the year, but I have $23,500 in my 401k. You understand? You're sacrificing a little bit to gain a lot. Now, when you turn 59 and a half, then you can start withdrawing that money out of the 401k. And then it is taxable then at that point, by the way. So the same tax rates apply, but here's the thing, that's going to be, 30, 40, 50 years down the line in the future. And the tax rates are going to be different. We don't know what those tax rates are. But it's a logical assumption to think when I'm in my late 20s, 30s, early 40s, I'm going to be making a lot of money. The tax rate's going to be higher on me during those years because I'm going to have more money in higher tax brackets. When you retire, you're not making as much money and you don't need as much money. So you're deferring taxes now to pay them later at a lower rate. That's the theory. And it's not a theory, it's true. There's also something called a Roth IRA, very similar, but the maximum is $6,500 per year for a single person. And this has nothing to do with your employer. The 401k is sponsored by your employer. Oh, and also, by the way, most employers will match a percentage, so they'll normally match 5% of your income. So basically, what that means is every month they'll put, in this scenario, it would be 5%. So, is that $500 into your 401k? Or I guess it would be $5,000 throughout the year is what it would be. I don't know. I didn't look up these numbers prior to making this. Most of you are probably asleep by now anyway, so it doesn't matter. Now, a Roth IRA has nothing to do with your employer. You can just do that, okay? But you don't get the tax advantage. So your money goes straight into or it doesn't go straight in, actually. You get paid, you get paid your $5,000 per month, and then you can put like $500 into a Roth. But you don't have that tax advantage now. That's your spending money that you're putting in the Roth, basically. It's after-tax spending money. And that'll grow at about 7%. It's very similar to 401k, but at the end, whenever you're 59 and a half, you do not have to pay taxes when you take that out. That's just like a checking account. Whatever money is in that Roth IRA is yours now. You can just take it out. You don't pay taxes on it. You're golden. Most financial advisors are going to push you towards a Roth, honestly. But it's tough to ignore this tax advantage. Me personally, I'm straight 401k right now. It's not what I want to be doing. There's also something called a traditional or a Roth 401k, which is it's exactly what it sounds like. It's after taxes. You don't get the tax advantage, but the limit is $23,500 a year still. That's what you really want to do. If you can max out a Roth 401k, buddy, you're going to be golden. But you're not going to have hardly any money left over in today's day and age. That's $20,500 a year after taxes. That's a lot for anyone. So, above the line deductions. 401k is the most important. It's the biggest one. It pretty much ends there. I think political donations are above the line. I'm not 100% sure on that. There's really not a whole lot else. What else is above the line? I think property tax is above the line, which is actually very, very relevant, especially when we start talking about real estate investing. I mean, that's a huge tax advantage. If your property tax can be deducted from your income and you don't pay taxes on it, That's huge. Healthcare technically is an above-the-line deduction, but you have to itemize your deductions at the end of the year, and for most people that doesn't make sense. In fact, you might have to itemize for political donations now that I think about it, or charitable or political. I think you have to itemize. And itemizing means I have given so much to charity, I've given so much to politicians, my health care is so much, and actually your state taxes is also itemizable, that it's more than $12,500. That's basically what itemization means. Most people do not do that. But if you want to save money, this is how you do it. You need to open a business, buddy. And this is why I actually kind of like the American tax system. When you have a business, everything is a tax deduction. Not really. It's technically a business expense. So if I make $100,000 a year, and I'm just going to pick a wild example, and I buy a $90,000, that's not a good example. Okay, if I make $100,000 a year in my business, and I buy, I don't know, I buy a computer and a camera, okay, and it was $10,000. That's a deduction right there. That's a business expense. Now I only pay taxes on $90,000. Okay, that's not much. But guess what? I also bought, I don't know. What type of business are we thinking of here, guys? I guess like a filmography business. Okay, well, I also bought more equipment. I just kept buying tons and tons of equipment. I bought so much equipment. And then I bought advertising. That's a good one. I bought $30,000 of advertising in the year. Okay. I don't know what else. I don't know. But let's say all of my deductions add up to $100,000. Actually, that would be dumb. They add up to $80,000. Okay. All of my deductions are $80,000. That means at the end of the year, I only pay taxes on $20,000. And you got the standard deduction then. What was it, $12,500? So you pay $7,500. You pay taxes on $7,500. That'd be nothing. It'd be like a couple bucks. Not really. It'd be like $100 or something. $100. Go through the whole year and you only pay $100 on federal income tax because you had so many business expenses. When you own a business, you actually do pay more tax. You have to pay self-employment tax, which, in my opinion, it's a fair trade. To be able to deduct these things in exchange for paying more taxes at the end of all these deductions, it's a good trade-off. Now, why this is so cool, at least to me, is because when you have a business, you get to say things like, well, if I don't spend this money, I'm going to have to pay taxes on it, so I better spend it. And that's a really fun position to be in. I'm not even kidding. You hear stories from these psycho fake gurus where they're like, oh, I bought a jet on December 30th, so I didn't pay any taxes that year. Okay, they're lying and they're dumb, and that's not how that works. But the theory is correct. When you own a business, the trick, okay, there's also mileage. You can deduct mileage. Now, some of this gets complicated. Like your rent, you can deduct. You can deduct your rent. You can deduct your phone bill, but you have to use it for exclusively phone, and then, or exclusively for your business, and then that kind of becomes a blurry line. Because it's like, okay, what if I make one personal call? Can I now deduct that? Look, I don't want to make a comment on that. All I want to say is this. Most people, when they own a business, the line between where a business expense begins and a personal expense begins, or I guess where a personal expense begins and a business expense ends, or whatever, it gets blurry. So they'll do things like they'll buy a car for their business and write it off. But do you think they're not going to go get groceries with that car? They are. I don't know if that's really the best example, but here's one. Somebody told me a joke. They had a business, and I remember what this person's name was, but I'm just going to make up a fake name. Dave Johnson. His joke was, Dave Johnson has never bought stamps before in his life. It's always Mercantile LLC that buys the stamps. You know? So he's using the stamps for personal use at times. But he's calling it a business expense. This is not a clear-cut, dry, or black and white scenario a lot of the time. A lot of the time it's difficult to tell. And I guess if you just use your best judgment, you're going to be okay, but I'm sure a tax attorney would tell you something different. So basically what happens when you own a business is you want to spend it all, really. You want to spend it all. And you want to spend it all on things that are helping your business grow that you also enjoy. Travel. If you travel for business, that mileage, if you drive, your plane ticket, all of that is tax deductible. You don't think I'm going to pop over to the beach and dip my toes in the sand in Miami when I'm down there for my supplement convention or whatever? You know, you see, it's a game. It's a game. And you got to learn how to play the game, like it or not. I could talk for hours about this. I honestly want to do another video about this. I think it's too long to begin with. I think we're at like 50 minutes or something like that. Look, the last thing I'll say about this is that I really think everyone should open a business. I'm stopping myself from continuing to talk more about that. If this video does well, I'll talk more about the business and finance. I really want to. I really like talking about it. But for now, we'll stop there. You guys have been great.